What do you do for your aerobic exercise? If you're like many people, you might get a little bit here, a little bit there, or maybe you're somebody who does it consistently every single day or a handful of days a week. But what do you do for your aerobic exercise? One thing that a lot of people default to because it's really convenient and relatively uncomplicated is walking. But is walking actually enough aerobic exercise for you? On today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, Julie and I are going to tackle this question head on. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. And while muscle health and muscle function are super important and, in our opinion, the primary thing that you should be focusing on while you're exercising, there are other health benefits that can be gleaned through doing activities that aren't specifically focused on building the health and function of your muscles, such as doing more traditional aerobic exercise. And when it comes to aerobic exercise, I'd say by far the most popular form is walking. But the question is walking actually enough aerobic exercise for you to see the health and function changes that you are wanting to see?
Charlie, I'm excited to talk about this. And when we were talking about this, I was thinking, I think a lot of people or kind of professionals, and I want to say they are professionals at something, but maybe not in exercise, but like to give the advice of, walking is the best exercise. Walking is all you need. And I think when people hear that, there's almost like a sigh of relief, like, oh, thank goodness they suggested something I think I could do. And I think it's uncommon for people like us to be like, hey, there's more to the story than just walking, because it kind of ruffles feathers, I think. And it definitely goes against the grain of what maybe your doctor might have told you, or, another trainer might have told you. And we're not here to say that they are wrong, but they also have never said that walking is everything you need. And so today we want to talk to you about just that. Why is walking maybe not everything you need? And is walking maybe something that would add to your cardiovascular or your aerobic routine? So today, I hope that we get to just explore this idea of why some people might say walking is the best exercise, or why is it so commonly suggested, and what Charlie and I's view is on using walking, what you need to add to walking, what it's really good for, and its shortcomings, because there are pros and cons to every single exercise, including walking.
Now, without question, I would say walking for many people has health benefits that come along with it. But like you're saying, Julie, there's also a lot more to the story than that. We hear the idea that, walking has health benefits to it, and then some leaps are made from that, and all of a sudden walking becomes the best form of exercise. And so you're right on. We need to discuss this because walking can be incredibly useful for many people, not for all people. But for many people, it can be incredibly useful at doing some very specific things from a health perspective. But it can also be not helpful, not useful, and somewhat detrimental for many people for doing other things and trying to reach other goals from a health perspective. And not only that, but if we're actually talking about cardiovascular health, well, then we need to explore what would make the cardiovascular system healthy and function better overall? And then how does exercise actually go about influencing that?
Charlie, let's kick it off by talking about some of the awesome, amazing things that walking can do for you. And to be honest, walking is one of my favorite things to do because it gets me outside. I love the fresh air. I also love that I can talk to people. Usually I go for a walk with someone or with my kids and I get to talk to them. It's just a really great experience. So I think a lot of people share a lot of the same interests that I just shared. It's easy. Put your shoes on. You just walk out your door. It gets us outside. You go walking with a friend, or you put your podcast in. Maybe you're listening to us while you're walking, or you're listening to your music and can get kind of mindless. And it's just a great way to do some general low intensity movement of your body. I think those are some of the biggest pros. And not to mention, almost everyone has availability to somewhere to walk. I mean, you can walk around your house and get walking in. Additionally, most people have shoes that allow them to walk. So the convenience is just, you just can't beat it. Everyone can walk, got spots to walk. Most people can walk, and it's low intensity enough that most people feel like it's palpable, like you can do it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the biggest benefit to walking, in my opinion, is the low intensity convenience factor. And so because of that, you can then do it intermittently throughout your day, which bleeds right into one of the biggest benefits of it that we see is it's a very convenient form of what we call all the time exercise. And especially when it comes to preventing and reversing insulin resistance, which can lead to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and many other health issues, getting in that all the time exercise by doing intermittent, low level, low intensity physical activity throughout your day, that's a really, really big thing. So walking in that regard is awesome. If there's a way to get in that all the time exercise, I would say walking hands down is probably my number one recommendation to do that. But aside from that, then there's a lot left to be desired from a health and function standpoint.
Absolutely. And if you're unfamiliar with our different categories of exercise, which is what Charlie had already mentioned, which is all the time exercise, and then we'll get to like the special event exercise, but the all the time exercise is low intensity movement done all throughout your day. So that means, you get up out of your desk and you walk around for 10 minutes, and then you might sit back down or get in your car, and then 40 minutes later you get up and move around again. So that's that low intensity exercise. And again, it serves such an amazing purpose for our health, but it doesn't serve everything. And that's where we normally find the issue. The issue is that this low intensity walking exercise is often used as someone's quote unquote workout, which is what we call special event exercise. So this thing that is very low intensity, very general, replaces something that is supposed to be moderate to high intensity and more specific. That's where the issues start arising, and issues in terms of there's a lot of health benefits that you're leaving on the table that could be serving you by exercising in a different manner.
Now, what's outside of the scope of this episode is the potential orthopedic ramifications of walking. That's not what we're going to be talking about during this episode, meaning like if you have a knee that's kind of bugging you and the stress of walking on that knee. So we're leaving that off the table right now. We're going to focus more on the metabolic health changes that can happen, and the disease fighting health changes and the cardiovascular health changes that can happen through exercise and what walking does and often does not promote. So one thing you brought up, Julie, that's so important for people to understand is the health benefits that come from exercise are largely due to exercise challenging your body. So your exercise has to be challenging to your body in order to start to create some of these really cool health changes that exercise can create for your brain, for your heart, for your muscles, for your ability to extend your lifespan and fight chronic disease. So that's a really important thing to understand, because if walking is really challenging for you, then awesome. It's something that could be enough aerobic exercise in that regard. However, if walking is not super challenging for you, or you could walk in a really challenging way, meaning like you could power walk really hard, but you are not doing that, you're choosing not to walk in a way that's really challenging for you, well, then the effort that you're putting forth and the exercise itself, it's not going to be enough to really create the health changes that we'd like to see exercise create within your body. And so that's where the issue is that if you are not challenging yourself with your exercise, then you're not going to be promoting the health changes that can occur from your exercise.
Charlie, I think you said it so perfectly that your body has to be challenged by your exercise to start reaping all these great health benefits from exercise. And walking for most people just simply does not do that. Plus, most people stroll, right? It's like kind of a stroll. And there are ways that you can make your walking challenging. For example, if you have a set of hills and you're, going up incline and you're feeling your muscles burn, that's a challenge to your body. Additionally, if you know how to power walk, or you can just, power walk it, that's also a challenge to your body. I actually find that I struggle to power walk because it bothers my joints before I can get, my muscles involved. Like, I'm not skilled at that technique enough. Like, I would have to start jogging before I could power walk.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are ways that you can make walking super challenging. I mean, nearly every single morning, I take our son for a walk, and I see a lot of other people out walking as well. And sometimes I'll see this older gentleman that's like carrying hand weights, and he has his sweatband on, and like, that he's focused, and he's just cranking away like up and down the street, like he's cruising. And it's like, okay, cool. He's walking at a level that's really challenging for him. And then you see other people that are coming out in their pajamas to kind of let their dog out, and they're just, still half asleep and just kind of, moseying down the sidewalk so they can get a little bit movement for their dog, and, they're cleaning up after their dog and everything like that. You might feel more awake after, especially now when it's a little bit, cool and crisp in the morning. Mm-hmm. But like, let's be serious. If you're wearing your bathrobe and slippers out, and, you're carrying your canteen of coffee, and, your little 3-pound dog is, just kind of, sniffing here and there, like nibbling on this and sniffing on that. And you're just trying to like, come on, let's get going. Like, that's not a walk that's actually going to like be super promotional of your health. I'm not saying that you won't get anything from it, but we're talking about, is that enough aerobic exercise for you? In all likelihood, no.
Right. And, I was just thinking too that a lot of people feel like, well, my walks are challenging on my body. I go, 2.5 miles, and by the end, my legs are tired. But mostly people are feeling tired from that because you've just been on your legs for 2.5 hours. It wasn't actually physically difficult. It's like anyone that had stood for 40 minutes, their feet would be tired. So you've been walking for 40 minutes, your feet are tired, but it's not a direct stress on your muscle. So what we're trying to say here is that there are some great benefits of walking. But for walking to fulfill your quote unquote higher intensity workout needs, it's got to change. It can't be a stroll. You either have to power walk, or you got to find some hills close by to you. And for most people, it is very difficult for a walk to be difficult enough. Like for Charlie and I, it is very difficult for us to make walking intense enough to be challenging enough on our muscles to elicit the health changes that we're looking for. Now, I will say, I did get into a routine once. So Charlie's mom, my mother-in-law, she is like the hustler of all hustlers when it comes to walking. I remember one day we walked.
She walks at like 8 miles an hour.
I know, seriously. Anyways, so that's like a style of walking that could actually be challenging on your body. And so just so you know, I used to do this with her, and it was so tough, and it was harder than running, I would say. So yes, there are ways to make walking difficult enough. In those ways, most people are not willing to do.
Absolutely. Now, Julie, you brought up a really neat point with one of your clients a couple weeks back when discussing their walking and kind of some ways that they could go about starting to make their walking more challenging. Like we've talked about like adding in hills, but even here in Illinois, it's pretty flat. So talk to us about kind of what you had suggested for your client to start thinking about and start doing. If somebody's listening to this right now and being like, well, I don't really have any hills, I don't have any hand weights, and so how do I go about actually making walking more challenging?
Yeah, so my client, I actually have a handful of clients, but this was one I was specifically talking to that just love walking. And she was saying, yeah, my husband and I, we go walking through the nature preserve every morning or most mornings. And I have to say, we're probably walking around 2 miles an hour, which is very slow. And she kind of got to that conclusion because on the treadmill, she's like, this is about how fast we walk. And it was 2 miles an hour, which is not enough to even, get your heart rate up, enough to challenge your muscle tissue enough. And so what I suggested to her was picking intervals during her walk where she would change intensity. So some of the ones that I had offered to her, I said, why don't you and your husband, you'll say, okay, for the next 100 steps, we're going to power walk and let's go. And try to fit in 3 or 4 of those during our walk. Or for the next 100 steps, we're going to jog. Another great one would be to stop wherever you are and do jumping jacks right in place. That would be a more rigorous insertion into your aerobic activity. So thinking about changing your walking in that regard can be really helpful. Another example of this is the other day we went for a walk with our kids and we had the stroller. So a walk with our kids is always very stroll-like, slower than a stroll. Anyways, my infant son was in the stroller and I wanted to keep him moving. So I decided to do some side shuffling while pushing the stroller. And that got pretty intense. So there are creative ways, if you don't have hills, if you're not very good at power walking, that you can add intensity to your walks if you're already going to be walking, that can start to glean some of the health benefits.
What I really like about that is if you think about, walking is just so convenient. Like I don't want to do anything else. All you're describing, Julie, is it doesn't change the convenience factor at all. Like you're already out on your walk. You're already doing it. All you have to do is just push yourself a little bit harder. And we're not saying for the entire time. You're just saying for a select period of time. Or just pause for a second and, like you're saying, do your jumping jacks or, do some squats in place or, do your side shuffles or whatever. Just something to mix it up so you are challenging your muscles at a higher level than you were when you are doing your walk. That's really the big thing. That's what we want to get across, is that walking is a phenomenal physical activity for many reasons, but for most people, it's not that great at actually challenging your body relative to the potential that your body has to be appropriately challenged. And so because of that, it leaves a lot of stuff on the table. So the way to augment that is when you're doing your walk, add in some things that are a little bit more challenging for you. And then now all of a sudden, you can start to get more of those health benefits.
I have another really good suggestion on adding in these challenges. So around here, we're right across from a really, really large mall called the Woodfield Mall. And there's a thing called the mall walkers. And what the mall does is they open up early where the stores aren't really open and, you can go walk there. Because also, we live in Chicago and most of the year is inappropriately cold to be outside walking with the ice issue and all that. So anyways, I remember a few years ago, me and my girlfriend, we met up at the mall during a lunch break and she's like, hey, do you want to go for a mall walk? I was like, sure, why not? It sounds fun. So we walked the mall during lunch and I said, okay, but the thing is that every time we come across a staircase, we have to go down and up it. So we would power walk, or it was probably between a power walk and a leisure walk because, we can't be plowing down the mall people that are shopping. They're in the way. But every time we came across a staircase, we would, hustle down them and hustle back up them. And that was some work. And it was really fun. It made it interesting. We kept moving. So if you ever are walking in a mall or you're walking in a place that has stairs, definitely hop on those stairs because that would really be helpful. But it's just another little token of ways that I was creative with it that made it fun.
Awesome. So is walking enough aerobic exercise for you? Well, if you're wanting your aerobic exercise to improve the health and function of your cardiovascular system, your brain, your muscles, help you to ward off chronic disease and improve longevity for the long term, then likely no. But there are some benefits that you can get right here and now with walking, and one of those is it's a great form of the all-the-time activity, which can help to prevent and reverse insulin resistance. And that's a really big thing. We don't want to discount that at all. But the reality is your long-term health changes from your exercise come from consistently challenging yourself appropriately with your exercise. And if you can do that, that's when you start to see all those really neat health benefits. And so if walking is really challenging for you, okay, awesome. But the day that it no longer becomes appropriately challenging for you, now all of a sudden, you need to figure out ways to increase that challenge. And so a lot of the suggestions that we gave may be things that you want to try out. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that loves their walking but doesn't really challenge themselves with it? Share this episode with them so they can learn why it's so important for them to kind of push themselves a little bit harder during their walks as long as their body's feeling up for it, so they can get more of the health benefits that can come from exercising. And while you're online, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this information when they're looking for podcasts on exercise and when they're looking for podcasts on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out, and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.